Jesus.
Now we're live?
Alternative.
Okay, this meeting is called to order. This is the February 25th meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Could I have a motion to approve the bills, payrolls, and warrants?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. A motion to approve the minutes of the February 11th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Voted. Announcements. Mrs. Cassavant, do you have an announcement?
I do. I would just like to announce that nationally recognized speaker Dr. Ruth Potee will present under construction what every parent must know about your teen and tweens brain development. This forum is presented by the Shrewsbury Coalition for Addiction Prevention and Education and sponsored by Representative Hannah Kane. This will take place on Thursday, March 5th at 6:30 p.m. at Shrewsbury High School in the auditorium. And there will be an important community awareness forum will be presented, and there will be an opportunity for elementary, middle, and high school parents and all community members to learn from the latest medical science and research on adolescent development. It's highly recommended that middle school youth attend with their parents. I was able to attend this presentation, I think it was 2 years ago, when Representative Kane and SCAPE brought Dr. Potee the first time, and it was eye-opening. And if you think that you have a child that would be immune to any sort of addiction, this will open your eyes to the possibilities. So I would encourage parents and families to attend this.
Okay, thank you. Any other announcements this evening? Okay. Mr. Miziga, do you have anything to report this evening?
A couple of things. I did want to just acknowledge that we had a topping off ceremony for the Beal project a couple Fridays ago, which was very well attended, and a nice ceremony where the final structural steel beam was placed for the project. And earlier this week, they did a very large concrete pour, 2,600 square feet, that I actually walked on today, so I got to walk through some of the building, and it's very neat to be able to see the hallways coming into formation, and the gym, and the media center and cafeteria. You can really start to see the shape of the building now with the floors in. I also wanted to just note that we had the opportunity to take a walk through the Milton Caterpillar Rental Center at 14 Fortune Boulevard earlier this week. It's a wonderful new business, and we welcomed them informally to the community, and they'll have a formal grand opening in April. And they will be servicing mainly the construction community with heavy equipment rentals. And it is a new model that Shrewsbury is the first location that they've selected to build a brand new facility for this new aspect of their business. Milton Cats is the authorized Caterpillar dealer for all of the New England states. So we're fortunate that they selected Shrewsbury to be the first one, but it will be one of maybe 30 or 40 because they plan to expand 3 or 4 of these new facilities every year for the next 10 years because they see the market being that strong. We got some promising news earlier this week with regards to the town West Suburban Health Group insurance rates, health insurance rates. So we'll finalize that process at a meeting with the West Suburban Health Group Board this Thursday, but they look like they're coming in up to 2% under what we had originally projected in the budget. At your next meeting, we will present for the first time a draft annual town meeting warrant for the May 18th annual town meeting. Initial list that we're working on has over 40 articles, and we'll continue to work on that and flesh those out and provide them to you. The Police and Municipal Campus Project is moving along, and we're doing programming meetings, kind of the real behind-the-scenes work of making sure that the architect knows what the police station will need for the future based upon our population and our force size and statutory requirements as it relates to cells, things like that, communications. And just to let the board know that we are closely monitoring and in close communications with state and local public health officials with regards to the coronavirus outbreak. It is something that we look at and discuss on a day-to-day basis to make sure that we are doing our best to never get behind should there be a community or local outbreak within the United States. We'll be ready to respond. That's all I have.
Just one follow-up request. I think as soon as there's a natural point to report on the progress regarding the analysis of the police station. But we should have a group in here to undertake an update as to where we stand since town meeting approved the money for that analysis. I think the talk of the police station has been around for so long, it's almost white noise at this point, whereas town meeting approved an expenditure for a certain level of analysis for that building and what some people call the municipal campus. We've had ongoing conversations with UMass regarding possible additional land related to that project and the need possibly to grow some level of footprint here. So I think that as soon as we can, that there's a complete update, Kevin and Mr. Chairman, we should get them in here.
That's a good idea. Just, you all set, Mr. Mizuka?
Yes, thank you.
Just to inform the board, while I'm thinking about it, I've been researching and starting to draft a proposed bylaw regulating the, I guess you call them the charity donation boxes. And there will be a placeholder on it for the next meeting, and I hope to have a draft ready for the next meeting to look at. If the board is inclined to go ahead, fine. If not, we'll keep working on it, but I just wanted to let you know, there's a lot of towns actually are starting to develop them because they're same issues with people put, it's not the people with the collection boxes, it's people bringing stuff to collection boxes, dumping it outside, and then it being a mess. So, in any event, I just wanted to alert the board to that. Okay, our next order of business is continued public hearing for 81 Clinton Pub LLC. So, I'll open the hearing, but I will ask for a vote to continue the hearing until March 10th at 7:15, because the applicant had requested a continuance because they are not ready at this point to finalize the application on the license, so.
Motion to continue the hearing.
Second.
Okay, motion second, all those in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Okay, Mr. Mizikar, new business. Zoning bylaw.
So I'm bringing forth to the board a request for consideration for an additional zoning bylaw change at the annual town meeting with regards to the zoning districts that we put in place for the various aspects of the marijuana industry, in particular cultivation. When we set the initial boundaries, I think we were very limiting in where we allowed cultivation facilities to be able to operate. And I'm seeking consideration and discussion with the board to expand the footprint of the districts where cultivation can occur to mirror that where manufacturing and processing is permitted to occur, mainly for two reasons. The first is just the underlying opportunity to be able to provide for another lever for economic development within the community based upon the feedback that I've received from the other marijuana, or from the two marijuana establishments that will be opening retail within the town. They have no stake in this. They have cultivation facilities and manufacturing facilities sufficient to be able to carry their businesses. However, they did confirm that the way the industry is integrating itself and aligning itself is that no cultivation facilities are being constructed without having manufacturing and processing on site because of the efficiencies that it gains in their operations. And I also have provided the board with somewhat of a overview letter from a potentially interested marijuana company called Noble Manna, who agrees with the vertical approach for these two aspects of the industry, and had reached out to me. This model of co-location of manufacturing and cultivation was also a key component of a preliminary discussion we had with another establishment that was looking to open a cultivation and manufacturing facility within the community that has not come to fruition. But, all those different players within the community said that if there's going to be a desire for the community to have cultivation, you must also be able to co-locate manufacturing and processing there. So, it's just a proposal. I think it provides us an opportunity. It doesn't provide us with any guarantees. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Mr. Chairman, is the testing function allowed within this proposal, Kevin?
The testing function already occurs where we allow manufacturing, so it is in the broader category already, the broader districts already.
So the district you're proposing would paint over that district, if you will. So you would be able to grow it, test it, manufacture it within the one unified series of areas in town.
That's right. And then the only other distinction essentially that there would be within the communities where retail is allowed, essentially a moot point.
And this is
because
not touching the
It's
retail.
not touching it at all.
I remember early on, before the ballot question, I think was even on a ballot, this board was approached regarding Bowditch Drive. Do you recall? Mm-hmm. Because the board at that time, as composed, was 5-0 in favor of pursuing that manufacturing. That since went away, and Table Talk Pie is there, as I recall my parcels. But I think this is a good idea relative to, if you will, streamlining that process and putting those related functions within a unified zoning district. So thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions? No? So, just so I know we're clear, but just so everybody else knows that this does not expand the retail establishments. It's just for the growing and manufacturing, so, okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, could I refer that to the planning board to be included in their two public hearing process?
Sure.
For that one, thank you. And the second is discussing some potential changes to the Route 20 overlay district with regards to the permitted density within that district. It was a little bit limiting, and we were looking for the opportunity to provide some relief should any entity want to be able to develop an alternative model to what the Edgemere developer had proposed with regard to residential density. So we laid forth some ideas to the board to set limitations based upon parking spaces. We can continue to flesh that out, but really it's just at the conceptual stage right now. And we can flesh out those details with the board as we work our way up to the annual town meeting. So this is for.
We have ample time to think about this ourselves.
For
and
details, yep.
Still to get it to the planning board for advertising, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we would ask them at this point to include this on their public hearing notices, so we have the opportunity should we want to move forward, but they could always just not consider it formally once it comes up.
I must admit to you, I don't understand it.
Okay.
I don't understand its objective, so would it be possible to table it this evening so that those of us with questions could converse with Kevin to get the background and then bring it back at a future meeting?
So, what are we actually doing tonight?
We're seeking approval to move potentially these two zoning bylaw changes to the planning board, requesting that they be included within their formal public hearing process of all zoning bylaw changes for the annual town meeting. So in order to do that, to Mr. Kane's comment, if it's not done this evening, we don't meet again in sufficient time for there to be two public hearings on each one of these. If you held one of them, there could still be one public hearing and it still could move forward, but the standard has been two.
Okay, so what's the preference of the board? Leave this and have it just move along, and next meeting we can decide if, we can review it and decide if we want to move ahead with it or not? That would be before the planning board actually had a hearing, right?
It's before, but with the notice times, you would not fit two public hearings in prior to
No, I
town
know,
meeting.
but
Okay.
if we started tonight, said, okay, let this go through the process, next selectmen's meeting, we could see the draft,
Yes.
and that would still give us time to talk before that and decide on the 10th if we wanted to move ahead with it or not. So we know what we're talking about. If we wait until the 10th, it can still be done, but there'd only be one public hearing?
That's correct.
Okay, so, just so we're clear. So, what would you like to do?
I don't want to hold up the board, but frankly, if somebody asked me what we were trying to achieve with it, I just
Yeah.
don't have an answer.
Okay.
I just don't understand I just flat out don't understand the changes in parking relative to the uses. But I'm not, if others do, great, send it forward, but I can see a member of town meeting saying, Edgemere hasn't come to fruition yet. We don't understand its impact on the school department, if any. Therefore, what are you talking about, 3 bedrooms and parking? And I don't understand, I have no answer for them whatsoever.
Yep.
And usually not as dense on this. If you guys understand it, fine, move it forward, and I'll try to meet with Kevin between now and someday to understand the background, but I just don't.
We can wait. I don't think it's gonna need more than one public hearing at the planning board anyways.
I'm fine either way.
You wanna wait?
I'm okay either
Let's wait
way.
till
I
we
understand
can
what
see
you're
something, have something to react to. Okay, all right, we're gonna, number 6, we'll move to planning board. Number 7, we'll hold till next meeting. Okay. Item 8 is FY '21 budget discussion. Mr. Mizzagati, do you have anything that you want to review with us this evening?
Outside of my comments earlier about the favorable rates of return that we're seeing versus our original estimate on health insurance, I really don't have any more opportunities. However, we did want to have this on the agenda. We'll continue to have it under old business as things emerge in the budget process, if any, that we can discuss. But also kind of just with acknowledgement of the late hour, nearly 10 o'clock, which we started the formal presentation at your last meeting. So if there's any questions that may not have been asked that evening, I'm certainly here to answer them. I have the full presentation that we can project if there were particular questions, or I'm just, use the opportunity for any discussion related to the budget since it's, pretty tight.
Okay. Questions? Anybody have any questions for
I think
for
John,
this evening?
Mr. Sammy has one. You can start.
Just a few general questions, just some, looking at the minutes even from our last meeting, didn't get a lot into it. Just talk a little bit about sort of 2 data points. What request didn't make the initial, what asks didn't make the initial request, and then in terms of getting the balanced budget, you reduced $600,000 of expenses. Can you talk a little bit about what was reduced and what the potential impact could be of that?
Sure. I mean, going into the, going into the budget process, we did ask departments initially to provide us with level services. But we're seeing more and more that those level services requests are coming in with, higher costs in the expense areas due to contractual increases. And additional full-time equivalents or employee requests. So those still continue to remain muted just because of the overall, conservative approach that we've taken to budgeting. So it's a little bit hard to still tell what wasn't asked that kind of should have been to even keep the bar moving forward. But as you had mentioned, we have removed from the department's request nearly $600,000 in order to balance the budget on the town side. And our requests, outside health insurance are, very marginal year over year. It did entail the removal of some staff, which I think would enable us to maintain level services that, we may see degradation in, mainly within the non-utility aspects of the Department of Public Works, like highway. And I know highway has asked for additional staff, and we've done a really good job in previous years of managing staffing loads and workloads with contracted staff. But I think as we move, in the very strong economic times, we're having trouble contracting with people throughout the summer months to do roadside mowing, moving brush back out of the intersections, and we get a lot of calls on that throughout the course of the year. We're, as the community expands, we do use highway staff to be able to maintain catch basins. And, we only currently do 800 of the 3,000, and we contract the rest out. It's somewhat economical, but having additional staff on the highway side would give us more flexibility year-round. in those summer months and during the winter months as we continue to have trouble first contracting with and then maintaining contracts throughout the course of any winter season. So we continue to see year after year with a strong economy that it takes longer and longer for us to sign contracts with plow contract. Later in the year, we're signing those contracts because they're staying on jobs later to finish up that work. We were able to,
John, would you mind if I asked a question on that matter?
Sure, no, please.
I have the wrong term locked in my mind, but if I, as a homeowner or private business person, hire somebody to do that mowing, I pay a wage. Correct me, share with me the right term. As a municipality in Massachusetts, you don't get to pay that same wage.
correct,
There is, remind me of the term.
Prevailing.
There's a prevailing wage. So for people who don't spend their time as you do dealing with that, can you explain that when you go to hire somebody to mow the end of roads or to do a catch basin, it's not like Sammy or Industry goes out and hires that person? Could you just enlighten people to that, please?
Sure, so prevailing wage laws were set in the 1940s through the Davis-Bacon Act of the federal government, and it really sets a minimum payment for certain trade and service areas when you're doing publicly contracted work. And what it eviscerated is basically slave gangs or work groups that moved around the country that were paid almost nothing, excuse me. So we often see that, as prevailing wage rates continue to creep up and we're able to manage our employee costs just a little bit better, that the prevailing wage rates are moving upwards of, $15 to $30 more than we pay on an hourly wage. And that, whenever you're talking about the average wage being in the low 20s for a municipal worker, you're talking a 50% increase in some instances when you have to pay the prevailing wage rate. And then it's really compounded because, so then the company takes a profit on top of that. It's more than just the employee wage and the rental of the equipment and everything that they go through. So we're just seeing two things, really. One, that's kind of getting out of touch with what we pay our employees. And two, the market is so overburdened with work that if you really want those people to come in, you have to pay even higher than prevailing wage. So it's just, we're at a tipping point, and maybe it won't last forever, but, we certainly are experiencing now.
Thank you, but I do think as you're explaining this in various settings, particularly in the upcoming Thursday Finance Committee and on, I think it's in our interest to draw that distinction, Kevin, because if you're working in the private sector, you see guys mowing grass, they're mowing grass.
Right.
So you have one context that is not applicable to this case. And it gets into the question, or our operating mantra has been to keep a very limited footprint. And I think the folks over the years have done a great job with contracted services, but prior to you arriving that last year, Bob Cox and Dan Magato wrestled with the HVAC millwright position, where we had it out, and clearly we should have hired someone, but we couldn't even get someone to come in.
Great.
So, thank you, John.
Sure.
I think another notable thing is that the chief of police had requested an additional patrol officer, which we're not able to fund in the current budget scenario. And as the community grows and we're fortunate to be vibrant enough and have expanding, all aspects of our service levels are impacted by population, so more residents, more police and fire calls, so that we're just, we're just trying to maintain the level of services we have by adding a new police officer, which we're not able to do in this budget. Then there's things where, we really had to get nitpicky in the budget and reduce the amount of money we have for maintenance and repairs for our public facilities. Some of the maintenance and repairs, within, the police and fire budgets and the highway budget on their equipment. Now, we'll obviously maintain our equipment to the best we can and keep it safe, but it may just cause some deferred maintenance, and, that starts to build up year over year and time after time. It really was a struggle. There has to be, for that 600,000, 550,000, there's 50 line items, so there's no one single thing that I can point to, but you know, it's kind of like death by a thousand cuts whenever we're pulling dribs and drabs out of individual line items. It would really just help us keep doing what we're doing today.
Okay, thanks. Can I ask just one follow-up question? Just on, if I remember correctly, and I was looking for the list, outside legal fees were had whittled down a little bit, I think, as part of the reduction. Just a quick question on that. Is that retainer fixed across the board, or if there's an extraordinary situation that's outside of that retainer?
So we actually don't have a retainer. We pay everything hourly.
Okay.
Yep, and I think we pay a very fair rate, you know, with a very reputable and good firm who doesn't overbook us on hours. The move that we made was to be incremental and just recognize the rising costs. We've held the amount level, so that then becomes, it's fine in this year's budget, but then it becomes a hope in next year that, you know, increased cost or, you know, one unexpected case or concern could really put us out of our budgeted range.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
All right, I'll come back.
Ms. Casfit?
Sure. As I look through this budget and I think about past requests from departments, I'm wondering how different are requests from departments year to year. I think back to my time on the library board of trustees, and I look at the current, what was asked for by the library director, and then what's funded, and it seems like it's the same year after year. They're asking for, you know, additional page hours and additional reference librarian, things that don't ever seem to make the final cut because there aren't enough funds. And I'm just wondering if other departments are seeing a similar sort of thing happening where they're asking for the same sort of things year after year and then still not being able to get them funded.
I would say definitely, you know, go back to the highway and public facilities in the custodial area. You know, those are two, and parks and cemetery actually have been repeatedly year after year requesting additional staff. Again, going back to inability to get reasonable contract rates. The cemetery mowing contract, you know, when we renewed it last year, went up or tripled. And, you know, we really offset the impact on the tax rate by using fees to help offset that cost. And that's not the best model because it's not the best long-term model. We can certainly manage it year to year that way. That's what we're gonna have to do again next year. But, you know, the fees aren't sufficient enough to really make that a 5 or 10-year model. It's gotta be a 2 or 3 year model. We really need to find recurring revenues to backfill that. So, we were fortunate, I think, this year to be able to identify some fee reductions in other departments like the treasurer collector. That has been a department that really needed additional support for benefits coordinator. And because the treasurer worked hard to reduce fees that we pay and expenses in other areas, we're able to add, you know, half FTE. But that's really the only case where we're using non-tax revenue funds that we're able to augment any staff that we have, or reduce other funds that were being used for other things. So there are definitely patterns that are reoccurring within this budget year after year that we're not able to fund, and then it just becomes harder and harder year after year, you know, as the, you know, to build off of the base that we have.
So as a follow-up to that, what are you seeing morale-wise as far as departments having to continually put forth a budget that they say reflects what they're going to need in order to do the job that the residents expect and provide that level of service, but then continually not being able to, you know, see any improvement in what sort of funding they're able to get in any given budget year? Are you noticing that that's like affecting morale or retention or the ability to attract new staff when needed?
I think it does impact morale. I think it's closer to normal, that it's not having a drastic impact, you know, this year any more than previous years. I think the board's willingness and ability to fund additional continuing education costs and providing opportunity to existing staff this current year has been very helpful. We've done a lot of professional development that we wouldn't have been able to do without that additional, you know, $20,000 that was used at the end of last fiscal year for this year. So I think things like that really help. I think one of the benefits that has offset some of that declining morale is we've had a lot of staff turnover, and continue to see, more retirements, announcements and things like that. And that has provided, fresh blood who are, have only been here, maybe more along the 1 to 3 year lines rather than the, 10 to 15 years. We certainly have staff in that category, but the turnover and the newness of some of the folks has kept things a little more invigorated maybe than there otherwise would have been if we didn't have that staff turnover.
Anything else?
I have other things, but you can go on.
No, go ahead.
So when you talk about having to reduce, and you talked about the $600,000 that were basically coming out of the maintenance that would be done on public buildings, as we go forward, things that get reduced, do they ever really come back? Or does it just seem like once they're cut out of a budget, they're pretty much gone forever?
Well, I mean, I think, so this is the first year where we've actually had to cut into prior year numbers, since I've been here, third budget. So we've actually reduced line items year over year. In the past, we've really been able to prevent any additional funds from going in. But it's really hard, right? So it's, once you dip down and go below a year and then, the outside world continues to press along in a strong economy, it takes even more the following year to get you back to what should be level, versus where you were 2 years ago. So it certainly becomes a bigger and bigger challenge year after year. A lot of it is related to just, the steady but very small growth within our revenue. Certainly our tax base, which is about $80 million of the 140 that we're gonna spend, is growing at, a little better than 2% because of new growth, but that's only one portion of our revenue. We still need to come up with that other $60 million that, have more level growth patterns than even 2.5%. So that's certainly a big challenge.
One more?
Sure.
So for people that aren't watching this meeting or maybe aren't reading budget documents or taking a look at what's happening with the town budget, what would they notice as a difference between, let's say, this year and the year that's coming as far as a reduction in service or things that maybe can't happen like the way that would be expected?
I don't know that you would see anything literally from, June 30th to July 1st, but I think there's a long-term trend that needs to be addressed as it relates to the budget because, so if we're not able to continue to maintain equipment, if we're not able to continue to feed the police department with officers and other departments, we're really not asking to create any new service areas or any new departments or significant staffing to do new things. It's really to continue to do things. So I think it becomes those aches and pains that we deal with seasonally. It's, again, we're not cutting the brush back, so we're getting the call and residents are annoyed with us because they can't see when they're pulling out of an intersection, or, we're not maintaining the islands, with the grass mowing and, there's just some preventative maintenance that is really prudent to do within the public buildings that we're not gonna get to, and we're just hoping that we get through another year and we don't have a catastrophe. And that's not a situation that we want to put ourselves in long-term. So, year over year, you're not gonna see a lot, but if the pattern were continued for even 2 or 3 years, there would be noticeable changes. Slowed response time, public safety, things like that.
I think that's exactly what I was expecting to hear. I just think that sometimes if you can't feel or see the change immediately, it's almost easy to feel like everything's just okay. And I think that we're in a situation where everything's not okay, and it's just difficult to communicate that to the public because for the most part, trash gets picked up, the streets get plowed and all is well, but then I see coming into our selectmen's correspondence, people who are looking to have additional sidewalks plowed, and then the answer to that being, well, we can't get there because we don't have the staff to, dedicate to that route because there's other things that they need to be doing. There's only so much time they can devote to cleaning a sidewalk, for example. And I just also am hearing a lot of people who would like to see additional sidewalks constructed, and there isn't funding for something like that. And there's no chance of that happening because I think the last request was $350,000 it would cost to construct just a tiny little section of sidewalk. But I think that there's the big picture you don't see, but there are residents that are expecting more, and the answer always seems to come back to funding. And I just think it's so important that the public realize that even though they don't see the erosion, it's happening. You know, it's kind of like the glacier that they keep saying is melting, and I can't see it because I'm not there, but I believe it's happening because I can see the effects of sea level rise. Like, you have to take our word for it that this isn't going to get better, that we need to do some planning for how we're going to address the revenue situation that we have and what we're going to do going forward.
I think that there's two different issues. There's the operating budget, which is more to what I think Mr. Mizuka was referring to on most of it, the replacement of equipment and stuff like that. And then there's the large capital projects. And I think it's safe to say that those capital projects, particularly road projects, have not been able to be kept up with because we basically use Chapter 90 money in the TIP program to do that work. You know, the part of what we're starting to deal with, we see it already. We've had to repave some roads that were built in that big explosion in the 90s and 2000s. And so it's going to get exacerbated, and it's a big problem because repaving roads and trying to build sidewalks, extremely expensive. And you're right, for years and years and years, people have asked about sidewalks, and we haven't been able to do them. And it's gotten more expensive to do them now because of complete streets and all that, and what you have to do. So it is a problem. I think that people haven't seen much of a degradation in service because the departments have been really good at finding ways to pick up efficiencies and just manage to get the things done. So we've always had these discussions about, matter of fact, at another meeting, we had a discussion of, nice to have, need to have, want to have, need to have. On the municipal side, I honestly don't remember ever having serious discussions in budget season about nice-to-haves, enhancements. It's always been want to have because we need it for a service, or need to have because we absolutely have to have it for service. So you're right, and it's been a long, long time. And, with the revenue models being what they are, it's going to be difficult to provide that. And at some point, services are going to be noticeably degrading because they're just not to be able to keep up as the town grows. So it's something we do need to think about and have to have a discussion about, I think. Start to have a discussion about it.
You made a great point, too, and I should have mentioned that, and you're absolutely right, that the people who work for our town will just do what it takes to get things done. But I think that goes back to the point that I was asking about morale, because there comes a point in time where there's only so much a person can do, and we have such a skeletal staff, especially when you look at the Department of Public Works, that it gets overwhelming. And, we have great people here. I think the example I think of often is the fire department, and how they have one of their firemen who's able to do a lot of the maintenance work on the fire trucks, and how much money that saves overall. Without that person, that would be a huge expense.
Right.
And a huge drain on the overall budget. And as we're heading into budget hearings, I just am not sure that at the end of budget hearings that we're going to have heard anything different than we heard last year at budget hearings. Just more of the same, and an inability to meet the demands with the revenue that we have.
We'll see. Anything else? Do you have anything else on any specific budget questions, anybody? No? Just one thing I might add. When we had the override, 2014, whenever it was, part of that override money was dedicated to capital projects that weren't able to get done, and that's why some of that stuff got caught up, so.
Right, but it doesn't take much to fall behind again.
No.
And we all know how hard it is to catch up once you fall behind, because, you know, that override, there was so much pent-up demand, you know, to bring us to a place where we were able to sort of say, take a breath and say, okay, we have what we need now to go forward and do our job, whether that be for the schools or for the town. And it's just, it's reminding me that we're kind of heading back to that same sort of scenario where you're looking at not being able to fund the things that need to be funded and having to put off maintenance and having to just wait a year, when a year turns into 2 years, and that turns into 3 years, and then we find ourselves so far behind that it's a deeper hole to dig out of.
Well, and we're seeing what happens with delaying purchases of equipment, rolling stock, like fire trucks. 15 years ago, around 15 years ago, engine truck cost about $350,000. What was the last one? 650, something like that? The last truck we bought? 850. And a few years before that, we bought the ladder truck for $750, and people thought that was it was a big number. I'm not saying it wasn't, but people thought that was like outrageous. How can something like that cost that much money? Now an engine truck is costing more money than the ladder truck, so costs do continue to go up, and it makes it more difficult.
Just one last point. I'd asked Kevin if he could provide just a total of the grants that we, as a town, apply for and receive. Because I think that there's a great deal of work that gets done with money that's brought in from grants, that work that wouldn't get done outside, within our regular budget if there wasn't for that outside money. So I was interested to hear what the total amount of grant dollars is.
I don't have it for you
I
this
know,
evening.
that's okay.
but
I told you I
we-
was gonna ask
yeah,
anyway.
No, I know. We will have it for, attempt to wrap it up to have it for Thursday or Saturday at the budget hearings.
Thank you.
We'll do that, yes, thank
I
you.
would say one of the things that you brought up about grants, but over the years, we've been able to shift costs in engineering, particularly engineering, into a planning board budget, paying it out of planning board fees, zoning board fees, permits and stuff like that, that otherwise, if we weren't able to do that with those fees, we would be in even a bigger problem, because we would either not had those engineers or we wouldn't have had something get done. One of the reasons we're able to get a lot of stuff done in this town, in the public works part, is because we have a functioning engineering department, which most towns do not have. So, I think we've gotten to where we are because we've been very resourceful, but it's still stressful.
It sure is.
Okay, anything else? No? Okay, then we'll move down to correspondence. Item 9 is a letter dated January 20th from Angela Welch, 14 Slocum Meadow Lane, regarding Kevin Welch Eagle Scout. Kevin did a project at Spring Street, led the project for his Eagle Scout project, successfully completed, and we don't have all the details, but we're following up to try to get more details. There will be a ceremony on March 7th that we usually provide a proclamation for, and if people are available, we go. So a lot of work, and it's a nice ceremony if you have time to do it. Item 10 is a letter dated February 11th from Timothy McInerney, Town Administrator, Town of Grafton, Kevin Mizikar, regarding Community Preservation Committee. The administrator in Grafton was replied to a question from, was it the committee or was it from you?
The committee.
The ballot committee, or you?
Their CPC and R, yes,
In that?
yes.
Anyways, basically, he was just saying what they were able to do with the community as a result of having the Community Preservation Act. So noted. Item 11 is a letter dated February 13th from Auto Lice, CMRPC, regarding costs and expenses for their budget. And our assessment this year is $10,452. So noted. Item 12 is a letter dated February 15th from Eric Lassen and Christine Gustafson, excuse me, of the Shrewsbury Historical Society, stating that the Historical Society supports the effort to institute the Community Preservation Act in town. So noted. Item 13 is an email dated February 17th from Ann Lally, 56 Brook Street, regarding 56 Brook Street. This is an issue, several issues on properties that were subdivided by a developer. The manager's office has been working on that. Well, what I would suggest is I review that with the manager and send out a response to the landowner. Okay. Item 14 is a letter dated February 18th from Jason Molina, Community Preservation Shrewsbury, 38 Stony Hill Road, regarding the Community Preservation Act. Mr. Molina has sent in what would be a proposed warrant article in motion. If the board, well, either way, the board would elect to put this on the town meeting, or if it was done by citizen's petition, so just to have it on the record. Item 15. Letter dated February 19th from Shrewsbury Parks and Rec Commission regarding Beal School softball field. As you know, we're looking to have the existing Beal School reused and redeveloped after we move into the new Beal School. The Parks and Cemetery Commission is concerned about the loss of that field and requested that if there were proceeds from the sale, that it used to be to replace the field in another location in town. So we'll keep that in mind as the project goes forward. Item 16 is dated, an email dated February 19th from Kristen Lass, Assistant Town Manager, regarding the MEPA certificate for Centec Park North. We got our MEPA certificate, and the final environmental impact report complied with the MEPA rules, and we now have a permitted site, including the roadway. So all we need now is somebody to go in and develop. That's good news. It took a while to get there. Item 17 is an email dated February 19th from Paul Regan, MBTA Advisory Board, regarding Jonathan R. Davis. I'm sorry, I didn't read that. I thought that was a notice of a meeting. What is it? Oh, the CFO, John Davis was the CFO, and he had
He passed.
passed away after working there a number of years. It's too bad. Okay, so noted. Item 18 is an email dated February 19th from James Vorner, the Fire Chief, regarding 2019 year-end report and statistics, so noted. I'm sure that'll be reviewed in the budget hearings. Item 19 is an email dated February 19th from Brian Moss, 16 Lutheran Circle, regarding his request to notify women about a fluoride study. I would like to suggest that I work with the manager and draft a letter to Mr. Moss that the Board of Health is the authority, or has the authority, oversight, responsibility for fluoride in the water system per state law. And it's our understanding that the Board of Health has denied this request in the past. So I think we're kind of at an impasse where we don't have, it's not our jurisdiction, and the Board of Health believes that this is not necessary, and I think we're just gonna keep going around with it. But anyways, so it's okay with the board.
Good idea.
We'll write a draft, and that'll be that.
I'd be in favor of that.
Okay, anything else come before the board in open session?
Nope.
Giving none, all those in favor of
Motion to adjourn.
adjourning?
Second.
Motion second, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.